Hi everyone, thanks for being with me, and it's great to know that you're subscribing, as are many people at the moment, to my channel. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'm going to talk today about my friend, my buddy, my mate, Douglas Murray again. Not just because he's a dick, but because he says stupid things that are inappropriate, unhelpful, and which really I object to greatly. And there'll be lots of people out there who will support him in what he has to say. But in this particular instance, he's talking about a subject which actually I know something about. And he's talking about intergenerational trauma. And he presents us with this bizarre version of what he believes intergenerational trauma is about. And I challenge that belief because I don't think he's got any bloody idea what he is talking about. So I'm going to now play for you a video clip which he was being interviewed by Rita Pants on Fire, and I'll talk about it on the other side. In fact, what I've done is I'm going to present to you my version of intergenerational trauma so that we can better understand what it actually is, as opposed to this right-wing concocted version of it, which is the sort of stuff that Douglas Murray talks about without any understanding or knowledge about it whatsoever. So here's the video. Let me know what you think on the other side. Please subscribe to my channel and ring the bell for further notifications as well. And we'll talk about this, or I will explain to you what intergenerational trauma is when we get to the other side.
The truth is the truth, but the modern left seem to excel at seeing racism when none exists, while sometimes being virulently racist themselves, Douglas. And I see these with those who are almost obsessed with this notion of intergenerational trauma. There's a bigotry there, bigotry of low expectations that says some people are destined for perpetual victimhood, and they ignore the experience of so many migrant communities, whether we're talking the Jews, Iranians, Indians, the Balkans, Vietnamese, many others who've experienced real brutality in recent decades, and yet they thrive. Where is their intergenerational trauma card?
Absolutely. Well said, Rita. I mean, think of all of those people you mentioned, just pluck one of those examples of Vietnamese. Think of all of the people who fled Vietnam, the Vietnamese boat people who ended up in multiple countries, including Canada, America, Australia. And broadly speaking, an extraordinary success story. They've worked hard, they've built businesses, they've built families, and doubtless they have trauma. But it's not something they use as an excuse or think they can just sit around and wait for people to just pity them all the time and give them checks. You know, this is a profoundly demoralizing and demotivating thing that is said. This whole idea of intergenerational trauma, it is an excuse. It is an excuse for communities which have other reasons for failing and for not being as competitive as they could be. It is an excuse that is used to get them out of having to face up to certain facts. It's the same in Australia as it is in America and many other countries. When a community is lagging behind, as long as they can claim some kind of intergenerational trauma, they don't have to be responsible for their own fatherhood problems or their own motherhood problems or their own drug or alcohol or other addiction problems. They don't have to be responsible for work problems or anything else. And I think it's a contemptible message, and it's deeply destructive to the people who have to labor under this excuse or have to use this excuse. And it's extremely demotivating for the rest of society who just wants to get on with things.
So we're going to delve into a profound and often overlooked aspect of mental health, which is intergenerational trauma. So I'm going to discuss this with you in a way that hopefully you will understand. We'll explore the far-reaching effects of trauma that transcend generations, leaving an indelible mark on individuals, families, and their communities. To begin, okay, let's define intergenerational trauma. It's a term that encapsulates the transmission of trauma from one generation to the next, not through direct exposure to a traumatic event, but through the behavioural, emotional and psychological consequences experienced by the survivors. These repercussions can be subtle, insidious and deeply ingrained in familial and cultural narratives. Intergenerational trauma often finds its roots in historical events that have caused immense suffering. And I'm going to be talking here in general terms, but I've also got an example that I'm going to talk about in just a moment. But when we talk through this, we need to understand that how it impacts First Nations people in this country and First Nations people actually around the world. Think of wars, genocide, forced migrations, and systemic injustices as have been experienced by First Nations people here in Australia. The impact of these events reverberates through time, affecting not only those who directly experienced the trauma, but also their descendants. Now let's take a look at some case studies to understand the varied ways in which intergenerational trauma manifests. The descendants, for example, of Holocaust survivors, for instance, may grapple with chronic anxiety, depression, or a heightened fear of persecution, even in the absence of direct exposure to the horrors their ancestors faced. And we experience this with Indigenous people who are often fearful of the welfare state, and particularly fearful of having their children removed. Now, this does apply for Indigenous populations around the world who have endured centuries of colonisations, particularly our own Indigenous people, dispossession and cultural erasure. The trauma experienced by their ancestors has been passed down through generations, contributing to higher rates of substance abuse, mental health issues, and socio-economic disparities. So the question arises, how does trauma embed itself into the very fabric of our being? Studies suggest that trauma can leave lasting imprints on our genes, altering the expression of certain genes associated with stress response and mental health. This epigenetic modification can be passed from one generation to the next, influencing how individuals respond to stresses and adversity. Now, breaking the cycle of intergenerational trauma requires a multifaceted approach. One crucial aspect is acknowledging the trauma and its effects, fostering open conversations with families and communities, something which the right in this particular country and probably around the world struggle to do. By sharing stories and validating experiences, we can begin the healing process. Therapeutic interventions such as trauma-informed counselling play a pivotal role in helping individuals and families navigate the complexities of intergenerational trauma. Creating safe spaces for expression where emotions can be processed without judgment is essential. Cultural resilience is another powerful tool in breaking the chains of intergenerational trauma. Reconnecting with cultural practices, traditions, and community can provide a sense of belonging and restore a collective identity that has been fractured by historical traumas. Educational initiatives that teach about the historical context of trauma and its impact on communities can also foster empathy and understanding, encouraging society to collectively address the root causes of international trauma. So, what does all this mean? Trauma is a complex and deeply entrenched phenomenon. It is not insurmountable, though. By acknowledging its existence, implementing through therapeutic interventions, fostering cultural resilience and educating ourselves and others, we can work towards breaking the cycle and promoting healing. None of this was mentioned by Douglas Murray. He has no idea, no understanding of the impact that trauma has throughout generations. I've offered some solutions. The best solution we have is to listen to people. Listen to those who are experiencing intergenerational trauma, the trauma that has impacted their past and is affecting them now. We need to do more. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Subscribe, ring the bell for further notifications. In the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and be safe.